Have you noticed something unusual happening in West Africa? At first, it looked like three countries simply wanted to work together. Then, they created a military alliance. Soon after, they announced a common passport. Then came a new flag, a joint military force, plans for a regional investment bank, and now a parliament. One institution after another, one decision after another, each step raising the same question: are Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger simply allies, or are they quietly building something much bigger? Because throughout history, countries have rarely been created in a single day. They were built piece by piece, institution by institution, agreement after agreement. And this is exactly why many people are now watching the Alliance of Sahel States, better known as the AES, with growing interest. Supporters call it one of Africa's boldest attempts at regional self-determination. Politics say it raises difficult questions about governance, democracy, and the future of the region. Whatever your opinion may be, one thing is becoming impossible to ignore. Something important is unfolding in the Sahel, and the entire continent is watching. Welcome to AfriArise. This is where Africa tells its own story, not through headlines written thousands of miles away, but through history, facts, context, and honest conversations. If you enjoy documentaries that explain Africa's past, present, and future in simple language, make sure you subscribe and join the AfriArise family, because today we are examining one of the most important political developments in modern West Africa, the creation of an AES Parliament. But before we answer what this parliament means, we first need to understand how we got here, because this story did not begin this year. It didn't even begin when these countries left ECOWAS. It started long before that. For years, the Central Sahel has faced some of the biggest security challenges on the African continent. Armed insurgency spread across borders, communities were displaced, thousands lost their lives, millions were forced to leave their homes. Governments struggled to restore stability while public frustration continued to grow. Many citizens began asking difficult questions. Why wasn't security improving? Why were foreign military partnerships producing limited results? Why did violence continue despite years of international intervention? Across Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, these questions became louder every year, and eventually, political change followed. Military governments came to power in all three countries. Each promised to restore security, each promised greater national sovereignty, and each insisted that African countries should take greater responsibility for solving African problems. Whether people agree with these governments or not, one thing became clear. The relationship between these three countries were changing rapidly. Instead of responding individually, they started acting together. In September 2023, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger signed what became known as the Liptako-Gourma Charter. At first, it looked like a security agreement. Its main purpose was simple. If one member country came under attack, the others would assist, much like mutual defense agreements seen in other parts of the world. But as months passed, the partnership began expanding far beyond military cooperation. New meetings were held, new agreements were signed, and gradually, the alliance began taking on characteristics that many regional organizations spent decades trying to build. Observers noticed something unusual: the pace. Most regional organizations often move slowly. Negotiations can last years, sometimes decades, but the AES appeared determined to move quickly, very quickly. One announcement followed another, each building upon the last, and now the latest chapter has arrived: a parliament. For many people, that single announcement changed the entire conversation, because armies can cooperate, governments can cooperate, even banks can cooperate. But when countries began creating institutions that represent all three nations together, people naturally began asking, exactly where is this project heading? Recently, senior parliamentary leaders from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger gathered in Ouagadougou. Their mission was straightforward: meet with the current president of the AES Confederation, Captain Ibrahim Traore. Following that meeting, officials announced that preparations for an AES Confederate Parliament would move forward. Representatives from the three member states are expected to form this new institution, with its inaugural season planned once final arrangements are completed. For supporters, this was another milestone. For observers, it raised new questions, and for critics, it became another reason to examine where the alliance is heading. Because creating a parliament is not simply opening another government office. Historically, parliaments are where laws are debated, policies are examined, budgets are discussed, governments are questioned, and long-term visions begin to take shape. That is why this development is attracting attention far beyond West Africa. The question is no longer whether the AES exists. It clearly does. The question now is, what exactly is it becoming? Could this remain a partnership between three independent countries, or could history be witnessing the early stages of something far more ambitious? To answer that, we first need to understand what this new parliament is actually designed to do. Because its role may reveal more about the future of the AES than any speech could ever. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that three neighboring countries have taken another major step towards sharing their future. Not just sharing a military alliance, not just working together on security, but creating something far more ambitious: a parliament. For many people, this sounded like another political announcement. But for those who have been following events in the Sahel, it may be one of the biggest developments in modern African politics, because this wasn't an isolated decision. It was another piece of a much larger puzzle. Over the years, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have been moving closely together at a speed few people expected. First came a common security alliance, then came a confederation, then came a shared flag, a common anthem, a biometric passport, a joint military force, a parliament representing these three nations, one institution after another, one decision after another, each raising the same question: are these countries simply cooperating, or are they quietly building something that could change the future of West Africa? Welcome to AfriArise. This is where Africa tells its own story, not through stereotypes, not through headlines written from thousands of kilometers away, but through history, context, facts, and thoughtful conversations. Today, we are exploring one of the most important political developments in the Sahel. We will look at what has happened, why it matters, and what supporters are celebrating, what critics are questioning, and whether this could become one of the most important political experiments that Africa has seen in decades. But to understand today's announcement, we first need to go back to where this story really began. Because the AES Parliament did not appear overnight. It is the latest chapter in a much longer story. The Sahel is one of Africa's most important regions. Stretching across the continent from west to east, it connects North Africa with Sub-Saharan Africa. For generations, people in this region have traded, traveled, and shared cultures across borders. But in recent years, the Sahel has also become one of Africa's greatest security challenges. Armed forces expanded across large areas. Communities were displaced. Thousands of civilians and security personnel lost their lives. Entire villages were forced to abandon their homes. Governments struggled to restore order. Foreign military partnerships were introduced. International organizations became became deeply involved. Yet, for many citizens, insecurity remained a daily reality. As frustration grew, political pressure also increased. Military governments eventually took power in Mali, then Burkina Faso, and later Niger. Each government promised to restore security, each promised to defend national sovereignty, and each argued that African countries should play a greater role in solving African problems. Whether people agree with these changes or not, they marked the beginning of a new political direction. Instead of facing these challenges alone, the three countries chose to work together. In September 2023, they signed the Liptako-Gourma Charter. The agreement created what became known as the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. At first, the alliance focused mainly on defense. The idea was simple. If one member country faced external aggression or a serious security threat, the others will come to its assistance. Many observers believed that to be the alliance's primary purpose, but something unexpected happened. The partnership continued to grow. New meetings were held, new agreements were signed, and gradually, the alliance expanded beyond security. It became something much larger. Instead of discussing only military cooperation, the government began discussing economic cooperation, infrastructure, trade, regional investments, shared institutions. Step by step, the AES began transforming from the defense alliance into a political and economic project. And with every new announcement, people began asking a bigger question. How far do these three countries intend to go? Because throughout history, major political unions rarely begin with one dramatic event. They usually begin with small institutions, one arrangement, then another, until one day, people realize something entirely new has taken shape. That brings us to the newest institution in the AES project, a parliament. But what exactly is it supposed to do, and why does it matter so much? When many people hear the word parliament, they immediately think of political debating laws inside a large government building. But a parliament is much more than that. At its heart, a parliament is where representatives come together to discuss issues that affect the people they serve. They examine policies, review important decisions, debate new proposals, provide oversight, and depending on the powers they are given, they can influence how government operates. So when news broke that the AES was moving ahead with its own confederate parliament, many people began asking an obvious question: why would an alliance need a parliament? The answer lies in how far the AES has already evolved. When the alliance was first created, cooperation focused mainly on security, but today, these three countries are working together in many other areas: trade, infrastructure, economic development, regional investments, border cooperation, and long-term planning. As these areas of cooperation continue to expand, there is a growing need for an institution that can discuss issues affecting all three countries together and not just one nation at a time. That is where the proposed parliament comes in. According to officials from the AES, the parliament is expected to help strengthen the confederation by creating a platform where representatives from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger can meet to discuss matters that affect the alliance as a whole. Its responsibilities are expected to include reviewing confederation policies, encouraging cooperation among member states, and helping align certain laws and regulations where practical. In simple terms, imagine three families living in different houses, but each family still manages its own home, but they all decide to build one large farm together. Now, they must agree on how the shared farm will operate. Who pays for what? How are decisions made? What rules should everyone follow? Instead of holding separate meetings every week, they create one committee where everyone can sit together and solve shared problems. That is a simple way to understand what the AES Parliament is trying to achieve. It does not replace the national parliaments of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Each country will still make decisions about its own internal affairs. Instead, the new parliament is intended to focus on matters that affect the Confederation as a whole. And that distinction is important because many people hear the word parliament and immediately assume that the three countries are becoming one nation. That is not what has officially happened, at least not yet. Legally, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger remain independent sovereign states. Each still has its own government, its own constitution, its own national institutions. The AES is officially a confederation, a partnership in which independent countries agree to cooperate closely while keeping their individual sovereignty. But history shows that confederation can sometimes evolve. Some remain loose partnership for decades, others gradually deepen their cooperation. There is no single path and no guarantee of what comes first. That is why so many political observers are paying close attention, not because a parliament automatically creates a new country, but because it often signals a desire for deeper cooperation. Interestingly, this is not the first regional parliament in Africa. The ECOWAS Parliament, based in Abuja, has existed for many years. The Pan-African Parliament, established under the African Union, has also been operating for over 2 decades. So the idea itself is not new. What makes the AES Parliament different is the context in which it is being created. Unlike larger regional organizations with many member states, the AES currently consists of only 3 countries. That smaller size could make decision-making faster, but it also places greater responsibility on the institution to prove its value. Many Africans have heard of ECOWAS. Fewer can clearly explain what the ECOWAS Parliament actually does. The same is true for the Pan-African Parliament. Supporters of the AES believe this new institution has an opportunity to become more active and more influential. Critics argue that its effectiveness will depend entirely on the powers it eventually receives. Will it simply advise leaders, or will its decision carry real weight? Will it become a place where important regional policies are shaped, or will it serve mainly as a symbol of unity? Those questions remain unanswered because creating a parliament is only the beginning. Its importance will depend on what it accomplishes in the years ahead. But one thing is already clear: the AES is steadily building institutions that go far beyond military cooperation. And when you begin looking at everything that has already been created, a bigger picture starts to emerge. The parliament is only one piece of a much larger project. So what happens when you put all these pieces together? That is exactly what we will explore next. History rarely changes overnight. Most of the time, it changes so slowly that people don't notice until years later. A treaty is signed, a new institution is created, a shared policy is introduced. One small step follows another. Then one day, people look back and realize those small steps were actually building something much bigger. That is why many analysts are now paying close attention to the Alliance of Sahel States. Not because of one announcement, but because of the pattern that has emerged. Let's look at that pattern. Since the creation of the AES, the 3 member states have steadily introduced institutions designed to bring them closer together. They have established a common flag, a shared anthem, a biometric passport intended to make movements within the Confederation easier. They have announced plans for a regional investment and development bank. They have strengthened military cooperation through a joint force. They introduced mechanisms to improve customs cooperation and regional trade. And now, they are creating a parliament viewed separately. Each of these developments may seem ordinary, but viewed together, they tell a much bigger story. Because throughout history, these are some of the building blocks many regional unions have used to deepen cooperation. Think about it. A passport makes it easier for people to move. Trade agreements can make it easier for businesses to operate. A shared bank can finance projects that benefit multiple countries. A joint military force strengthens collective security. A parliament provides a place to discuss common policies. Each institution performs a different role, but together they create a framework for closer integration. That doesn't necessarily mean the AES is becoming a single country. However, it does suggest that the three governments are thinking beyond short-term cooperation. They appear to be building institutions designed to last. And that raises an important question. At what point does close cooperation become political integration? To answer that, we first need to understand the difference between a confederation and a federation. Although the words sound similar, they describe very different systems. A confederation is a partnership between independent countries. Each member keeps its own sovereignty, its own government, its own institution, its own national security. The countries simply agree to cooperate in specific areas they believe are better managed together. A federation, on the other hand, goes much further. Power is shared between a central government and regional governments. The member states remain important, but certain powers belong to one federal authority. Countries like Nigeria, the United States, and Germany are examples of federations. The AES has not announced plans to become a federation. Officially, it remains a confederation. But history shows that confederations sometimes evolve over time, so remain exactly where they are. Others gradually become more integrated and eventually dissolve altogether. There is no fixed path. Everything depends on political decisions, economic realities, public support, and events that cannot always be predicted. That is why many observers describe the AES as a political experiment. No one knows exactly where it will lead. Supporters believe the federation could become a model for African-led regional cooperation. Critics believe the project still faces significant political, economic, and institutional challenges. Both perspectives deserve careful consideration because the future of the AES will not be determined by speeches alone. It will depend whether on these institutions improve the lives of ordinary people. Farmers find it easier to trade across borders. Will businesses grow? With roads and railways connect communities more effectively? Will security improve? Will young people find more opportunities? These are the questions that matter most, because institutions only succeed when people experience the benefits in everyday life. A beautiful flag can inspire pride. A parliament can hold important debates. A passport can symbolize unity. But in the end, citizens judge government by something much simpler. Can they live safer lives? Can they build successful businesses? Can they educate their children? Can they hope for a better future? That is the true test facing the AES. And perhaps that is why reactions to this project have become so passionate. Some people see hope, others see uncertainty, others celebrate every announcement, others ask difficult questions. Neither response should be ignored, because every major political project in history has faced both excitement and skepticism. The real measure of success is not how ambitious the vision sounds, it's whether that vision delivers lasting results. And that brings us to another important part of this story. Not everyone sees the AES through the same lens. While many Africans welcome these developments, others remain cautious. Why? Because every bold political project creates supporters and critics. Whenever history begins to shift, people rarely agree on what it means. Some see opportunity, others see uncertainty, others celebrate change, others ask whether the change is happening the right way. The Alliance of Sahel States is no exception. Across Africa, and even beyond the continent, the AES has become one of the most debated political projects in recent years. For some, it represents hope. For others, it raises difficult questions. To understand the full picture, we need to look at both sides. While many supporters believe the AES matters, supporters argue that the AES is doing something many African leaders have spoken about for decades but struggled to achieve. Moving from words to action. For years, African summits have discussed regional integration, free movement, economic cooperation, joint infrastructure, shared security. Yet, many of these ideas have taken years to move from conference halls to reality. Supporters believe the AES is moving faster. Instead of waiting for perfect conditions, they say the three countries are building institutions step by step. They point to the creation of a joint military force, the development of a regional investment bank, the introduction of a common passport, and now a parliament. To them, these are signs of political determination rather than endless discussions. Many supporters also argue that closer cooperation could reduce dependence on external partners by allowing African countries to rely more on one another. They believe stronger regional institutions could improve security coordination, encourage trade within the region, and help member states finance projects together. For young Africans especially, the project has become a symbol of something bigger, a belief that African countries can design solutions that reflect their own priorities, rather than simply adopting models developed elsewhere. Whether or not every goal is achieved, that idea has inspired many people, while others remain cautious. At the same time, critics believe important questions still need answers. One of the biggest concerns is representation, because the current government of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are transactional authorities. Some observers ask how citizens will eventually participate in shaping these new institutions. How will representatives of the AES Parliament be chosen in the future? Would they be appointed, or could they one day be directly elected by the people? Another question concerns accountability. Creating institutions is one thing. Making sure those institutions remain transparent, effective, and responsive is another thing. History has shown that well-designed organizations can struggle if they lack strong systems of oversight. There are also economic questions. Building shared institutions require funding. Infrastructure projects require investment. Maintaining a regional military force requires resources. Launching new financial systems requires careful planning. Supporters believe these challenges can be overcome through cooperation. Critics believe they will test the Confederation long-term sustainability. Neither side has all the answers, because the AES is still evolving. Its future will depend less on promises and more on performance, a project the world is watching. The growing influence of the AES has also attracted attention outside Africa. International organizations, neighboring governments, and global observers, some have welcomed efforts to improve regional cooperation. Others have expressed concerns about governance, political transitions, security, and human rights. These different reactions shows how significant the project has become. Whether people support the AES or question its direction, very few now ignore it. The alliance has become part of a much larger conversation about Africa's future. How should African countries cooperate? What role should regional organizations play? How can security, economic development, and national sovereignty be balanced? These are not questions with simple answers, but they are questions that will shape the continent for years to come. The next challenge may be the biggest of all. If there is one issue that almost everyone agrees is critical, it is money. Not just investment, not just trade, but currency itself. Because while the AES has introduced new institutions in many areas, each member state will still use the CFA franc. For some people, that is simply a practical economic arrangement. For others, it represents an unfinished chapter in the region's journey towards great economic independence. Supporters of a new regional currency argue that monetary sovereignty is essential if the Confederation hopes to build a fully integrated economic system. Others caution that creating a new currency is one of the most complex economic decisions any group of countries can make. It requires strong financial institutions, careful coordinations, public confidence, and years of preparation. This debate has become one of the most important questions surrounding the future of the AES, because creating a parliament may be politically significant, but creating a shared currency could reshape the region's economy for generations. If the AES has surprised the world with the spread of its political integration, there is one area where many people are still waiting for the next major step: money. Not roads, not passports, not military cooperation, but the currency people use every single day. Think about it for a moment. Imagine 3 countries sharing a parliament, working together on security, planning regional development, building common institutions. Yet, when people buy food, receive their salaries, or pay for goods, they still rely on the currency that was never created by the AES itself. That is the situation today. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger continue to use the West African CFA franc, the common currency used by several countries in the region. For decades, supporters have argued that the CFA franc provides monetary stability and facilitates trade among its member states. Others, however, believe the currency has become one of the most debated symbols of Africa's post-colonial economic history. To understand why this issue matters so much, we need to take a brief journey into history. A currency with a long history. The CFA franc has existed since the 1940s. Over the years, its structure has changed several times. Today, it is managed through regional central banking arrangements and is linked to the euro under agreement involving France and member states. Supporters argue that this arrangement has helped maintain relatively low inflation and exchange rate stability. Businesses often value predictable currencies because they make trade and investment easier. But critics see things differently. They argue that African countries should have greater control over their own monetary policies. In their view, decisions affecting African economies should be made primarily by African institutions. This debate has existed for decades, long before the AES was created, and it remains one of the most discussed economic issues in Francophone Africa. Could the AES create its own currency? Since the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, discussions about a future common currency have become more visible. Leaders in the 3 countries have expressed interest in strengthening economic sovereignty, and the idea of developing a shared currency has been mentioned in public discussions. However, as of now, no official launch date has been announced, no final name has been confirmed, and no complete public roadmap has been released. That is important to remember, because creating a currency is far more complicated than printing new banknotes. A successful currency requires trust, strong financial institutions, foreign exchange reserves, a central banking system, payment networks, commercial banking coordination, economic planning, and perhaps most importantly, public confidence. If people do not trust currency, they simply won't use it. History has shown this in many parts of the world. That is why economists often describe monetary unions as some of the most difficult political projects any region can attempt. If the AES eventually decides to introduce its own currency, several major questions would need answers. How would would the new currency be managed? Would one central bank serve all three countries? How would exchange rates be determined? How would inflation be controlled? How would businesses transition from the existing system? How would international trade be affected? These are technical questions, but they have very real consequences for ordinary people. The price of food, the cost of fuel, business investments, employment opportunities, savings, loans, everything could be affected. That is why experts often say monetary integration cannot be rushed. It requires careful preparation. Why this decision could define the AES? Many observers believe that a shared currency would represent one of the clear signs of deep economic integration. Not because a currency solves every problem, but because it requires an extraordinary level of trust between participating countries. Sharing money means sharing responsibilities. It means coordinating economic policies, managing financial risks together, and making difficult decisions collectively. Some supporters believe a future AES currency could strengthen regional trade and reduce dependence on external financial systems. Others argue that maintaining economic stability should remain the highest priority, even if that means moving more slowly. Both perspectives deserve serious consideration because the stakes are high. If successful, a shared currency could become one of the most significant economic developments in modern West African history. If poorly managed, it could create challenges that can affect millions of people. One-time and careful planning will determine which path the AES follows. Beyond three countries, as discussions continues about currency, another question has quietly emerged. What happens if more countries decide they want to join the Alliance of Sahel States? Would the Confederation remain a partnership of three? Or could it eventually expand into something much larger? Because history shows that regional organizations often face a difficult choice. Should they strengthen what they have been expanding, or should they welcome new members while building their institutions at the same time? The question should shape the next chapter of the AES story. Every major regional organization begins with a few members. The question is never just how it starts. The real question is who joins next. When the Alliance of Sahel States was created, it brought together three neighboring countries with similar security challenges and similar political goals: Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. At the same time, many people assume the alliance will remain exactly as a partnership between three nations focused mainly on security. But today, that assumption is being questioned. Why? Because the AES was never presented as a completely closed project. Its founding vision leaves room for cooperation with other countries that may share similar interests and objectives. That possibility has sparked conversations across West Africa. Could other nations eventually seek membership, or will the AES remain limited to its original three members? While no new country has officially joined the Confederation, there has been growing public discussion about the possibility of expansion. One country frequently mentioned in these discussions is Togo. In recent years, officials from Togo have publicly acknowledged that cooperation with the AES is something worth considering. However, it is important to separate public discussions from official decisions. As of today, Togo has not joined the Alliance of Sahel States, and no formal expansion has been announced. That distinction matters because in politics, conversations often begin long before agreements are signed. Why expansion could be attractive? If the AES were to welcome additional members in the future, the benefits could be significant. A larger regional market could encourage trade. Infrastructure projects could connect more countries. Businesses would gain access to more consumers. Transportation networks could expand. Regional security cooperation could become even stronger. And with a larger population, the alliance could carry greater political and economic influence within Africa. For supporters, expansion represents an opportunity to strengthen regional unity while reducing barriers between neighboring countries. The vision is simple: African countries working more closely together, sharing resources, supporting one another, and solving common challenges collectively. But bigger also means more complex. History teaches us another lesson: growth often brings new challenges. The more members an organization has, the more difficult decision-making can become. Different economies, different political systems, different national priorities, different expectations. Reaching consensus becomes harder. That is one reason why many analysts believe the AES should first strengthen its existing institutions before expanding. The argument is straightforward: make the current system work, build strong institutions, show measurable results, then consider welcoming new members. Others disagree. They believe expansion itself could strengthen the Confederation by increasing its economic and political weight. Both views have merit, and history offers examples supporting each approach. Some regional organizations expanded early and grew stronger. Others expanded quickly and struggled to manage internal differences. The AES will eventually have to decide which path makes the most sense. What will determine the future? In reality, the future of the Alliance of the Sahel States would not be determined by speeches alone. It will depend on results. Can the alliance improve security? Can it encourage investments? Can it create jobs? Can businesses trade more easily across borders? Can ordinary citizens experience real improvements in their daily lives? These questions matter far more than political slogans, because successful regional cooperation is ultimately measured not by the number of agreements signed, but by the quality of life those agreements help to create. If people begin seeing better roads, growing businesses, improved schools, reliable electricity, safer communities, and stronger economies, then the institutions being built today will earn lasting public support. If these improvements fail to materialize, even the strongest political vision will face difficult questions. A defining moment for West Africa: whether the AES remains a confederation of 3 countries, expands to include new members, or eventually evolves into something entirely different. One fact is already clear: a political landscape of West Africa is changing. The conversation taking place today are different from those of just a few years ago. Ideas that once seemed unlikely are now being openly discussed. New institutions are being created, new partnerships are emerging, and new possibilities are being explored. No one can say with certainty what the AES will look like in 10 or 20 years from now. History is still being written, but this uncertainty is exactly what makes the moment so fascinating, because we're not looking back at history, we are watching if it unfolds in real time. There are moments in history that people recognize immediately, and there are moments whose importance only becomes clear years later. The creation of the AES Parliament may be one of these moments, not because it instantly changes the lives of millions of people, but because it represents another step in a larger journey. A journey that began with 3 countries facing similar challenges. A country that has steadily expanded from security cooperation to political and economic integration. Today, the Alliance of the Sahel States has a growing list of shared institutions, a common vision for cooperation, a joint military framework, plans for regional development, and now a parliament. Whether this project ultimately succeeds will depend on far more than the announcements. It will depend on leadership, economic planning, public trust, regional stability, and most importantly, whether ordinary citizens begin to see meaningful improvements in their lives. Supporters believe the AES could become a model for stronger African-led cooperation. Critics argue that important questions about governance, representation, and long-term sustainability still need answers. Both perspectives deserve careful attention because history is rarely shaped by optimism alone or by criticism alone. It is shaped by results. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about the AES is not what it has already built, but what it has inspired. Across Africa, people are once again asking big questions. What should regional cooperation look like? How can African countries strengthen another? What institutions are needed to meet the challenges of the future? And what role should Africans play in designing those institutions? Whatever answers emerge, one thing is certain. The decisions being made today in the Sahel will be studied for many years to come. Whether they become a blueprint for future cooperation or simply one chapter in Africa's long political journey, only time will tell. Here at AfriArise, we will continue following these developments, not with speculations, but with facts, context, and balanced analysis, because Africa's story deserves to be told with depth, honesty, and clarity. If you enjoyed this documentary, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the AES should remain a confederation, or could it one day become a federation? If you found this video valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with others who want to understand Africa beyond the headlines. Until next time, this is AfriArise, where Africa tells its own story. My name is Blessing Chris. See you in the next one.